beautiful homemakers. We are still in Chapter 3 of Pamphlet 2 of the original Fascinating Womanhood. And this section is called How the Mannish Woman Wins. We had a good talk yesterday about this. So if you haven't listened, you might want to go back and hear the last video. How the Mannish Woman Wins. We all know of other cases where the inconsistency is not so much in the outward appearance of the two lovers as in their natures. In such cases, the woman, either a professional or a businesswoman, is eminently able, efficient, businesslike, with a strong and virulent character. We cannot imagine how such a woman could succeed in appearing tender, frail, weak, and childlike to any man. Suddenly, however, a man comes along who appears to her a real hero, in the presence of what she thinks is masterful strength. She feels as if her abilities, her efficiency, her determination and vigor are as nothing. Much to her own surprise, she too begins to feel in his presence frail, weak, tender, little, and helpless. At an unguarded moment, she lets her manner and actions betray this feeling, and the man's face lights up with interest. "What a delightful creature she really is!" he exclaims to himself. "How mistaken I have been about her!" And if you will eavesdrop on one of their tete-a-tetes, after their acquaintanceship has ripened to the point where she no longer restrains the childish aspect of her character, you will find her acting for him the part of the fluttering little bird, as well as Amelia or Deruchette could ever act it. The only difference is that she is too proud or too sensitive to act this part before others. As usual, the world wonders what attracts a man in such a forbidding woman, entirely unconscious of the fact that she is not the same woman to him as she is to others. The fact, therefore, that apparently mannish women often succeed in winning men should not lead you to conclude that the quality of childlikeness or girlishness is unnecessary, because it surely is. This reminds me of Genesis 3:16, the latter half of that verse. The King James Bible says, "And thy desire shall be to thy husband, and he shall rule over thee." The New Living Translation explains that verse a bit more. "And you will desire to control your husband, but he will rule over you." The English Standard Version says, "Your desire shall be contrary to your husband, but he shall rule over you." As women, we are all looking for our own alpha male. They may not be alpha men with other men, but they must be an alpha to you, or you won't respect him. The majority of men cannot handle an alpha woman. So many alpha women get passed over because men see them as just too much work. However, every once in a while, an alpha male will come along who needs an alpha woman to tame, just like in The Taming of the Shrew. Have you ever watched that movie with Liz Taylor? If not, that's your homework, especially if you consider yourself to be an alpha woman. Some men love the challenge of an alpha woman, but frankly, most men don't. It is actually these women that need these videos the most. They need to do the work the most in order to have a successful marriage. But very few of them will ask, what can I do to strengthen this marriage? And so they just end up not getting married or getting divorced until someone shares the secrets with them, either in person or they stumble across a video like this one and actually are open-minded enough to say, oh, this is what I've been doing wrong. The next section is called What Every Lover Finds. As with girlishness, so it is with purity and sweetness of character. Though you may see the men attracted by many women who do not appear to have a good character or a sweet disposition, you may depend upon it that they seem to have these attributes in their adorers' eyes. The fact that lovers can see in each other qualities that are invisible to others has given rise to the notion that love is blind. Thackeray and Hugo are not alone in thinking that an attractive woman must have a sweet character, for every man ascribes such a character to the object of his affections. No man who really adores a woman can conceive of her as anything but an angel, a goddess, the very essence of purity and goodness. That this quality is necessary to true womanly attractiveness has been insisted upon by every poet and lover that ever lived. Does that surprise you? I bet it does. This also explains why when we start yelling and nagging and criticizing and complaining that our husbands don't see the angelic aspects of our character anymore, and then the marriage just goes downhill. I've got more homework for you. Have you ever watched the black and white version of The Enchanted Cottage with Robert Young and Dorothy McGuire? Don't even attempt to watch the updated color version because you'll be disappointed. Watch the black and white. The story's about a very homely maid who works at a honeymoon cottage and a wounded war veteran who is jilted by his beautiful fiancé because of his injuries ends up taking his honeymoon there alone. And as they care for each other, her physically and him sharing insights with her, they begin to fall in love and eventually see each other as no one else sees them, as the most beautiful couple in the world to each other. The Enchanted Cottage does a wonderful job of proving that when you physically care for someone, they become beautiful in your eyes. This is another reason that women should be at home caring for their family, because it leads to a greater love. Analyzing the qualities of a lovable woman. In order to understand the importance and the necessity of the qualities which have been shown as essential to a lovable woman, we will now study the expressions of men who have made an effort to describe the feelings aroused in themselves by attractive womankind. Such a study, moreover, will serve further to bring out the man's viewpoint, a knowledge of which is almost indispensable. We will begin with Longfellow, who thus describes the feelings of John Alden toward Priscilla. There is no land so sacred, no air so pure and wholesome, as is the air she breathes, and the soil that is pressed by her footsteps. Here for her sake will I stay, and like an invisible presence, hover around her forever, protecting, supporting her weakness. The highest type of love. We see here that her purity and sweetness of character have aroused in him such an adoration that even the air she breathes and the ground she walks upon are sacred to him. We see also that her air of tenderness, of childlikeness, of weakness and frailty have aroused in him a protective feeling which makes him want to support and cherish this helplessly soft creature forever. It is quite evident that if she did not possess these qualities in his eyes, she would not have won his protective adoration, the highest and the only type of love worth having. The man is enamored not so much with the prospect of happiness for himself in winning such a glorious creature, as he is with the prospect of protecting and sheltering the tender, sensitive, and cuddlesome little bundle of girlishness from injury and sorrow. The proposal to Deruchette. We will now turn again to Victor Hugo, who thus expresses the feelings of the young clergyman for Deruchette herself. There is for me but one woman upon earth. It is you. I think of you as a prayer. You are like a glory in my eyes. To me you are holy innocence. I speak to you, mademoiselle, without venturing to approach you. I would step even further back if it was your wish that my shadow should not touch your feet. You alone are supreme. You are the living form of a benediction. Now, of course, this is a clergyman talking to a woman. They're not trying to put her in place of Christ. It's just an extreme adoration, and this is how they talked 100 years ago. In a letter to Adele Foucher, Victor Hugo describes the feelings not of one of the characters of his invention, but of himself, as follows. Do I exist for my own happiness? No. My whole existence is devoted to her, even in spite of her. And by what right should I have dared to aspire to her love? What does it matter, so that it does not injure her happiness? My duty is to keep close to her steps, to surround her existence with mine, to serve her as a barrier against all dangers, to offer my head as a stepping stone, to place myself unceasingly between her and all sorrows, without claiming reward, without expecting recompense. Alas, if she only allow me to give my life to anticipate her every desire, all her caprices, if she but permit me to kiss with respect her adored footprints, if she but consent to lean upon me at times amidst the difficulties of life. In these two selections you will detect the same worship of an angelic character, the same desire to protect the weakness, frailty, and tenderness of the loved one. This worship and this desire to protect are what constitute love. You cannot, therefore, expect to be loved unless you appear to the man worthy of worship and in need of protection. Those with an ugly disposition and a reprehensible character cannot arouse worship unless they disguise their true natures. Those who are strong, virile, and manifestly able to take care of themselves without the aid of a man cannot arouse a desire to protect and shelter. The necessity under these circumstances of the girl having a character worthy of worship and a nature in need of manly care and protection is apparent to anyone. This is quite a hard fact that many women will have trouble accepting. The type of woman that perhaps you cannot stand, dependent, fragile, helpless, who exerts no control, is absolutely charming to most men. Now think back to the story of Little Women. Who was the star? Jo. Number one, because she was the author writing about herself, so we really got to know her. Number two, because she was a tomboy, and so she had a unique perspective. She wasn't like the other women. And number three, because filmmakers have built up her character to portray what a real woman Jo was like. They don't like to portray women baking or cooking, sewing, or enjoying child care. They like to think that real women want to live on nothing but adventures. But think that if Meg had written this story, Jo would have just been the comic relief in a normal courtship story of forbidden love. Most women are inherently more like Meg than they are like Jo. It's just that our schools and some aspects of society have told us that Meg is unworthy, and we are to emulate creative, impulsive, bipolar Jo. Meg is seen as humdrum, predictable, and uninteresting. She's just a little blip in the story. Personally, I always liked Meg best because I could see that she was a sensible, lovely woman in her face and in manners, and loyal to her family and her true love. As just a little girl, I knew I didn't want to emulate Jo. Meg was my ideal, and I wished she were in more of the story, because Meg was a Proverbs 31 woman and did all things well. Jo was fun, but an impulsive, immature brat, in my opinion, until she finally grew up and began her transition into what Meg was, a fascinating woman. Jo's tomboy ways made her perfect for then opening her home to a school for boys. But she remained a mature, lovely, fun-loving helpmeet to her husband, just like Meg. They both found husbands. Meg just had an easier time of finding admirers because she already possessed the characteristics that the majority of men admire. Amy was also considered more charming by men than Jo. Today we don't encourage early marriage, like when that story was written. You aren't going to be called an old maid or spinster at 30. But the fact remains that women with these charms will all be snapped up in their 20s by men of all ages. And women who quash these innate charms will be overlooked by most men, except as a plaything. Have you ever watched the 1933 or 1949 movies of Little Women? Your homework is to do so. I think now you have 3 movies to watch. And pay close attention to Meg. She is the epitome of the ideal woman from a man's point of view, and Amy follows in her footsteps. Beth stays angelic, having never developed her human side, because she never reaches womanhood. Jo exuberantly does everything a woman of that time is not supposed to do. But once she grows up, she naturally begins to develop the ideal woman traits, because they are natural, after all. If you stick with listening to these pamphlets, you'll learn the very traits that drive men gaga and arouse reverence and adoration, which blinds them to any lack of beauty or faults you may have, long-married husbands included.